what it is. Welcome to another episode of Video Game Therapy. I am VGT Yor, and today we're going to do our first review ever. Now that the dust has settled, the spoiler hype has died down, and the internet mouth breathers have stopped getting excited about ripping Naughty Dog a new arsehole over their narrative choices, it's time for us to sit down and take a look at The Last of Us Part 2 and ultimately decide whether the game was a success, a flop, or whether it was just bang average. Quick disclaimer, there'll be no spoilers in this video. We'll touch on some plot points, but I want to make sure that anybody who watches this video can still go and play the game spoiler free. I've got you back.
I find it hard to believe that The Last of Us Part 2 is this bad.
I loved The Last of Us Part 2.
What a steaming hot piece of shit.
The Last of Us Part 2 is a masterpiece worthy of its predecessor.
Hey, the story wasn't for me.
You want to know what I think? It's a pretty good story.
Clearly, The Last of Us 2 has divided the gaming community, with some calling it an absolute triumph, and others claiming that they wouldn't wipe a runny dog shit off their shoe with it. Luckily, I managed to shield myself from all this, which gave me the seemingly rare opportunity to go into the game without clouded judgment and without any plot points ruined. So that's really the intention of me doing this review over a month after the game came out. It's an opportunity to consider the game the way it was intended to be considered before the savage beast of the internet chewed it up and spat it out. You see, many young gamers live or die by what the internet tells you is good and bad. And unfortunately for Naughty Dog, over a month before the game came out, the whole story, the full plot, leaked. Meaning that you could jump online, you could read the whole plot of the game without even holding a PS4 controller. So coming from that perspective, the way that The Last of Us Part 2's plot plays out was not at all what fans expected, and in some cases not what fans wanted. And this set into motion a snowball of hate towards Naughty Dog that hit its peak right when the game landed on shelves. This meant that gamers were going into playing the game with preconceived notions about how the game would be perceived, whether they would enjoy it or not, and many boycotting the game altogether, but that didn't stop them from weighing in on the debate on Reddit and Twitter and so on.
Do not buy this game. Based on what I've read, based on what I've seen, do not buy this game.
Personally, I'm glad I saw these spoilers because I probably would have got the game. I probably would have paid a lot of money to get the game.
You might wonder, well, Muda, how can you say Last of Us 2 is dog shit? That's right, I really can't. The game isn't out, and I haven't played the game.
It doesn't fucking matter if the game is out or not. The story is still dog shit.
Now, I shouldn't have to tell you how downright stupid it is to cast judgment on a game without actually playing it and experiencing it, at least not in its intended form. Reading the plot of a game without holding the controller in your hand and actually playing it is a bit like reading the lyrics to a song and not ever fucking listening to it and just deciding this song is shite because those lyrics, I'm not into it. Now, just to be clear, I'm not defending The Last of Us Part 2 as a game. It's not without its faults. I'm just defending its rights to a fair trial. So, the game takes place a few years after the original, and Ellie and Joel are both living fairly comfortably, all things considered, in a colony in Jackson, Wyoming. The start of the game focuses on showing us how our beloved and a bunch of new characters are living. It gives us a sense of what they have to do to survive, and it shows us how the colony is thriving. Of course, this is in preparation for it all to take a turn and set the game in motion, where Ellie heads out on another daring adventure. This time though, it isn't a journey across America. The whole game is set in the Seattle area, or a version of Seattle that is collapsing in on itself. And whilst people playing this game will still feel a sense of journey, it's less a journey of time and distance and more one of the senses, both good and bad. which I'll get back to. The game's story is set over just a 3-day period, intertwined with flashbacks for narrative purposes and multiple playable characters. If you think about the more dense areas from the first game, where everything was more tightly packed and the sense of threat consistently loomed, that is basically the whole of The Last of Us Part 2. There is rarely a moment where you don't feel under threat and therefore your guard has to be up all the time. Whilst it removes any serenity from the main game world, it's an accurate reflection of what it is to play as Ellie in the world that Naughty Dog have created. She's older now and she doesn't feel like she needs to be protected by Joel, but the reality is that Ellie's still only 19 years old and she's smaller and weaker physically than Joel, and mentally you can tell she's conflicted between her anger, her ego, and her ability to make the right choices. The dense, compact world that Naughty Dog have created does an excellent job of bringing that to life through gameplay. As soon as you step out into the world as Ellie, you immediately and consistently feel like the underdog. Graphically, the game is superb. There isn't much else to say about the game graphically. Naughty Dog, time and again, get the absolute best out of current hardware, and this is no exception. At times, it's easy to forget that you're in control of the characters on screen because everything just looks so damn good. Now, let's have a little chatter about the gameplay. Honestly, this is where I feel like Naughty Dog have fallen short. I'm not saying the game is bad to play. I mean, how could it be? It's the same tried and tested formula that worked so well on the original, but that's the problem. The Last of Us Part 2 fails to really develop that gameplay or take it to new levels. There is the introduction of new stealth mechanics such as tall grass to hide in or trucks to crawl under, but ultimately they're nothing innovative, and these are borrowed concepts from stealth games that have been using them for over a decade now. Metal Gear. There's an introduction of a few new enemies, but really nothing that forces you to change the way you play the game. The formula is the same every time. Point your gun at an enemy and shoot. Some may look bigger and meaner and take a few more bullets, but look beyond that and they're really just reskins of enemies that we've already seen and faced. Honestly, this was a real disappointment for me. In The Last of Us 2, you face human foes, you face zombie foes, and you face mutated foes. The possibilities should be endless for what you can do with them. I think back to games like God of War or the Final Fantasy VII Remake, and yeah, I know that they are a different genre, but they're an absolute masterclass in thoughtful and considered gameplay. They make the player consider each and every encounter in terms of weaknesses and strengths, considering what's in the loadout, how can the enemies be countered, how will the environment impact my decisions. There's next to none of that in The Last of Us Part 2. It's essentially the same considerations as the first one. Runners can see you, clickers can't see you, and bullets kill everything. Because of this, there are times in the game where you feel like you're in an endless loop of clear an area, loot it, move on. The game forces you to use its stealth mechanics, which is great for me. I'm an advocate for stealth gameplay, but for somebody who's not really into the stealth and more into the action, I could imagine the game being a clumsy experience for them, because if you go in guns blazing, then you will quickly be overwhelmed and you'll end up low on resources. These are mostly complaints about what the game is lacking though, as what the game does have is still a very polished experience. It may be that Naughty Dog are a victim of their own shortcomings with this one, as generally the bar is set so high for Naughty Dog games, we don't expect them to lean too heavily on their old games, and we expect new and innovative ways to play them. This brings me to the story. The story was obviously at the forefront of considerations when this game was being built and created. Within the opening 2 hours of this game, you will feel the full breadth of the audacious and daring story that Naughty Dog want to tell here. It's not your standard tale of something that starts off tranquil and crescendos into something epic and energetic. The game starts as it means to go on, and it's not afraid to turn corners that you didn't expect or even that you wish it hadn't. And this is where all the hate has come for the story, really. because there's a massive difference between reading the story and experiencing it at your fingertips. There are few games, if any, that make you feel like such a significant part of the story, experiencing and participating in it, sharing the feelings of the characters around you. The game is intentionally graphically disturbing at points. You're meant to feel uncomfortable as you share the emotions of the characters you play as. You'll find yourself conflicted in your own decision making as a player, as you yourself question whether your mission is guided by rage and revenge or doing the right thing. The plot tackles heavy and uncomfortable subject matter, and every character in the game is dissected. In The Last of Us Part 2, there is no such thing as a heroine or a one-dimensional villain. For me, the story is where the game shines. Verdict. What's the verdict? This is such a difficult game for me to sum up. On the one hand, I think there's so much more that they could have done with the game, but on the other hand, if you own a PS4, I wouldn't recommend you go another second without experiencing what this game has to offer. So many of the greatest movies and stories ever told are underappreciated when they're first made available to us. It's because humans love familiarity. We turn to these stories for entertainment and to feel things that we can't feel in our normal day-to-day. But The Last of Us Part 2 tells us a story that isn't afraid to take us to places we wouldn't choose to go. It's bold, it's daring, it's visceral, and it'll leave you with a taste in your mouth that you love and hate in equal measure. Because of this, it's a story that, in my opinion, is absurdly underrated, and I imagine in years to come, people will look back on this game and appreciate it for its true mastery. That being said though, ultimately, this isn't just a story, it's a video game, and sadly, that's where it falls short of getting the score that it probably should have got. Its inability to grow and develop its gameplay into something more dynamic and rewarding than its predecessor is the reason why I've decided to give this game a 7.5 out of 10. It is almost an awesome game, and it is one that if you are just after a really good and visceral story, you need to check this out straight away. Anyway, that is it. That is our first review on the channel, our first official review anyway, because I'm always chatting shit. If you like what you saw, as always, please stick a thumbs up on the video. It helps me out so much. The more likes, the more the video gets spread around. If you're new here, please hit that subscribe button. I've also started a Discord for our community that we're building over on Twitch and here on YouTube. I'll leave a link to that in the description. Let me know what you thought of the game. I'm interested to know what you guys thought, and let me know what you thought to the review. Do you think I'm right? Do you think I'm wrong? Bang it in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.